All right, guys. So, welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Delegate Chris Runion, and we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that's going on here in the state of Virginia with just everything. There's a whole lot of stuff that we're going to talk about, and I'm going to have you start talking about some of the taxes and some of the other things that Democrats are trying to do here. So,
Right, absolutely. And I really do appreciate this opportunity, Josh. It's important for us to understand as a community how different there's the folks in Richmond and Washington and those unelected people like Soros and such want Virginia to be. And that's not what our constituents, that's not what the Commonwealth has been or should be. And so there's a bunch of different issues that we want to talk about. Certainly the taxes. The Democrats have this philosophy that they believe that there is no dollars safe in your pocket, that they can better spend your money for the things that are important to them than that. What I believe is that we're better off letting you decide how to invest your money and how to spend your money and how to take care of your family and take care of your community instead of someone in Richmond or Washington or elsewhere in the world making those decisions. I do want to first say how privileged I am to be able to represent the 35th District. I grew up out here. It is home for me. And I really do appreciate being able to go. I was at the greenhouse this morning and saw folks that I know. And I just appreciate having the opportunity to live in this environment. We're blessed. Jennifer and I are blessed to be able to do this. And I want to thank each and every person for your support and your prayers, to be frank about it.
yeah. And there's some things that came out over the weekend and through the early of this week about Hakeem Jeffries and the phone call with Virginia Democrats over the whole redistricting thing, because that's been something that's just been blowing up over the last week or so after the Supreme Court ruled that it was unconstitutional. And now there's a rumor that they're trying to pass a bill or a law to lower the age limit for being a Supreme Court justice to try to pack the court and remove all those justices. What do you have to say about any of that stuff? Or do you have any more information about?
I think you covered it really well, and they obviously did not intend for that information to get out. But that tells you a couple of different things. One, any measure is on the table for them. The ends justify the means, and their goal is to, as Obama said a number of years ago, to fundamentally remake the United States of America. And that is an antithesis to what we believe. I think American exceptionalism is real and is appropriate, and we should both promote that and protect that. We've got folks that, again, they're not elected. I don't understand why Mr. Jeffries would have interest in Virginia politics. He ought to keep his nose in his own state's politics and make sure that they're doing effectively and able to achieve what potential they have, and let Virginians run Virginia. And to be unhappy with the results, I understand that. There's elections, every one of us have been unhappy with the results. But we don't go out and fundamentally change the process to be able to create an outcome that we want, a small group of people want. That is not what the United States has ever been, and that's not what the Commonwealth of Virginia has ever been. Let's deal with what our laws are. Let's operate in a constitutional fashion, and let's agree that that is the basis of what we're going to do to run our Commonwealth. And then let's come together and do things that matter in a positive way for citizens' lives. The affordability conversation was all through the election. And to be honest with you, it was a bait and switch. There has been nothing affordable about what the Democrats have pushed through the Virginia General Assembly. A great example of that is we've been returned to RGGI, which is this regional greenhouse gas initiative. We're the most southern state on the East Coast that participates in it. It artificially raises our electric bills that you and I pay. This is not something that some big corporation pays. They pay their part too, but you and I see it in our electric bill every month. It has artificially raised that $500 million this year, and that number will continue to go up. And it does not achieve affordability. It actually makes it more and more difficult for the average citizen to be able to take care of their family, buy their groceries, buy their gasoline, pay their electric bill, and take care of their home. And so I just don't understand. I do understand it. It's all about achieving power. in making all of us subservient to this ruling class. And we talk about socialism, and most people don't really understand what socialism means compared to what an American environment is, what a Virginian lives and operates is. In our world, you have the ability to be responsible for yourself. And you can make yourself and your family achieve all the things that you want to achieve. In a socialistic economy, we're all removed to the lowest common denominator. And so you remove the initiative to work, you remove the initiative to achieve, and you have a small group of people that will tell us all what to drive, where to live, what to eat, what to do. And I just don't believe that is what we're about.
And you mentioned a couple of points ago about affordability and this everything that they're doing. And you're a state delegate for the 35th district. That's Rockingham area of Virginia, Shenandoah Valley, gorgeous place, by the way. As a state delegate like yourself, what is a plan for you to try to help make things more affordable, or what things do you think that we should do as a state for either you as a delegate or the Republican Party or just both sides in general? Like, what's a good way to try to make Virginia more affordable within the next 10 years? And is there a plan to do any of that kind of stuff?
Well, I certainly have a plan and a goal. I think there's several things. One is if you start with the premise that government only needs to do what government needs to do. And that requires you to make some hard decisions sometimes, but government needs to focus on the required areas. And, that's to provide protection for our country from within and without. Okay, that's the first thing. And then there's fundamental activities that governments can most effectively perform. Transportation is a great example of that. Now, there's a role for the private sector in that, but our transportation system should be a well-run, efficient, and effective process. And that's what we work on. There's a role for government in healthcare. There's a role for government in education. But those roles need to be narrowly crafted and jealously guarded from expansion. Now, folks on the other side of the aisle do not believe that. They believe the solution to people's lives, problems in their lives, is more government. And, I think most of us really understand, if you've lived more than a few years, you understand that is not the way the solution does work. And so affordability means make sure your governments only do what are necessary. Don't let them grow beyond what the requirements are. And that's at state, and that's at local, and that's at federal level. Sometimes hard decisions have to be made. But again, if you go with the philosophy that the dollars that an individual earns, if the wealth that an individual earns is best spent and invested by those individuals instead of the government, then you can move forward on that. And then there's particular things you can do. There's tax policy that we can encourage work. We can encourage savings. We can encourage investments. For instance, I carried a bill that would have allowed you to get a tax credit if you built a home that was more energy efficient than the standards require. I like that idea. The state is only going to pay money in when you actually do something. And so that makes sense. It encourages you to build a better quality home that will both reduce your monthly operating costs, and because you got a tax credit, your mortgage payment won't be any higher. And so in the long run, your family is much better off because you can take those dollars you saved instead of sending it to the electric company and invest it in your children or invest it in your parents, or invested in yourself so that you've got the ability to live the life that you want. That bill died a very quick death in committee because it said it was too concentrated. The person that told me this said that it was too concentrated on the middle class. And that just flummoxed me. I don't understand why we would punish those folks that are out there trying to achieve positive things. So there's some tax policy things we can do. Affordability. The last or the 4 years of Governor Youngkin's administration, we returned $9 billion of excess tax collections. That's how you got to describe it. It's more money than we thought we were going to have back to citizens. We also had record investments in public education and in transportation and in other areas. So we were moving along really well. The governor handed $1.5 billion surplus to the new administration, who has promptly spent it. And the two the House and Senate Democrats are arguing over how much more money they want to spend on top of that. And so when you talk about affordability, it's having restraint and only perform those things that you absolutely have to. And so you don't have to take too much money from in high taxes from our citizens. The things that you can do, for instance, because we had this surplus cash, we could have eliminated the 1.5% sales tax that's left on food. And local governments use that money to do schools and roads and all the things local government does. We could have replaced that revenue stream with money that we've already collected in Richmond. And so local government would not have been harmed in any fashion. Citizens would have paid less. When you go to the grocery store, you'd have paid less. And there's other opportunities to do that type thing, Josh, where we can stop taking so much from our citizens and let them keep their money.
And I think that honestly, we should be collecting less taxes in general because, like, a lot of Democrats use the situation of, oh, well, people are suffering and their people are too poor, like they need subsidies or whatever. Well, maybe if you take less money, they wouldn't need it,
Well, absolutely. Or reduce costs. We've artificially inflated various costs. Housing is a great example of that. Why do we keep talking about affordable housing on the equation of how do we provide money for people to be able to buy that? Why don't we figure out how to build those houses for less money? That's never part of the equation. But again, I talk about there's hard choices that have to be made. And I look back at what my grandparents did and my great grandparents did. My grandparents grew up pre-Depression. They were married right before the Depression. And my grandmother told me, had they borrowed money to build their house, which they finished and did not put central heat in it, they would have, had they borrowed money, they'd have lost their home during the Depression. And they made sacrifices because it was the prudent thing to do. We don't, we are structured in our government now to make that very difficult for people to make good, prudent decisions like that. That's where government has grown beyond the appropriate scope. We need to pull back.
I completely agree with that. And you've talked about a lot of different topics and a lot of like different roles and stuff. And what is one of the biggest priorities for you this year? Because I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's been going on between taxes and just redistricting and just there's so much, especially with the new governor and the new General Assembly that we have. But like, what's one of your biggest priorities? What is one of the things that you want to focus on? And also, like, if there's one situation that you could just have disappear overnight, like if there was one problem in the state of Virginia that you could just have just vanish overnight and it would solve itself, what would that be?
Well, there's three things I'd like to talk about on that. The budget, and that's the one problem
The budget.
Go away, right? And the other is the mentality that the other folks use to force this redistricting amendment on the Commonwealth. And I'm really proud of the Supreme Court justices against immense pressure to vote the appropriate way. I'm disappointed the three that voted in the negative. I read their argument, and it seemed pretty specious to me. They were really grasping at straws. Their argument was election day is only one day. Well, that's not how the world works anymore.
Well, I think for the three justices that voted against it, I think that their biggest thing was they were scared of losing their job.
Absolutely.
Because the General Assembly is who gives them that.
Yeah, we vote every 12 years. Those folks are subject to reappointment on that. And the third thing would be we need to keep our word. Politicians have the reputation they deserve, and this data center question is a great thing. And data centers should be a local decision. It's a land use decision. And so, our local governments need to decide on that. There's a role for the state to play in that, but we should not be picking winners and losers at the state level of where that should be. So let's have an open and transparent and honest conversation about that and everything else that we do in an economic development world. But to promise something to someone to attract them to come to your community, and then once they're here, pull the rug out from under them is just patently unfair. It's the data centers this time. They're the popular whipping boy. Next time, is it going to be agriculture? Is it going to be transportation companies? Is it going to be private schools, homeschoolers? Whatever we've committed to as a community, we can change those things if you have an open and honest conversation and you've met your commitments that you've made. And that's what's not going on right now. So those are the three of the things that I'm really worried about. The budget is the fundamental responsibility of state government. The way Virginia is set up, we have a good balance between local government and state government, and the state collects the majority of the money that runs all the government services, and we send some of that back for public education, for transportation, for other areas, human services. Big demand for behavioral health and other health services. That money flows through how we collect money at the state, and it needs to go back to local government for them to establish their budgets. When we don't do our job, nobody else in the Commonwealth can do their job. I've had school teachers tell me that they're struggling to believe that. I want to back that up. I've had local governments tell me that they're unable to finish their budget and know how many teachers they can hire and what they can pay teachers because the state's not done their job. What I'm being told is that there's no good conversations, that until the Democrats decide how much money they want to spend, we will not have a budget, because until they decide that, then once they decide how much money they're going to spend, then they're going to decide how much taxes they're going to increase to be able to cover that. The real question is, I mentioned we've spent $1.5 billion of the surplus that Governor Youngkin left. And then the House budget increased the budget about $2 billion or so, and I did not support that. The Senate budget is another $2 billion or so on top of that. So we're really talking about increasing last year's budget somewhere between $4 to $6 billion. And keep in mind, we had a surplus to begin with. So our revenues are not the problem in the Commonwealth. Our spending under this current regime is the problem. And I'm really disappointed in the governor. She campaigned as a moderate. She campaigned as someone that was going to listen to the other side. And yet, if you look at the legislation she signed, it has not been bipartisan legislation. It's been legislation rammed down our throat. Redistricting is one of them. I think it'll be interesting to see what she's going to do with marijuana and gambling and all those other things that there are certain groups of Democrats want them because of the money tied to it. And then my understanding is she's been opposed to those things in the past. So we'll see what's going to go on there. When you start down that path of unrestrained government, unrestrained spending, it is tough to slow that train down or stop the train as it ought to. It's really, really difficult. And people need to reach in within themselves, those of us that are elected, and say, I can't do this because it's not right for the Commonwealth in the long run.
And I mean, if you look at states like Maryland or California or New York, once they do a tax or once they start taking in a certain amount of revenue, they don't usually stop. And once something starts, it's kind of it. Like you said, it's kind of hard to stop that train. And we've talked a lot about the budget. We've talked a lot about the money. And obviously the budget is a huge problem and everything. But I want to talk about like the raising too of like the minimum wage and everything that's going on, and how that might hurt businesses, especially small businesses, because obviously companies like Walmart, Target, things like that, they're not going to be really that affected. But it's going to be these small mom and pop businesses that have 4, 5, 6 employees that are going to have problems. And then also talking about the whole thing with the paid leave, and because it's just a whole disaster. Do you have any information on that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I do. And, I think let's group all this stuff together and let's call it employment. And what the Democrats did in the name of affordability, they created increased costs and increased levels of difficulty to both hire people and keep people employed. Talked about the family and medical leave and paid medical leave. Those are going to apply. And what's interesting is the employee is going to pay half that cost on the family and medical leave. And so I've heard numbers from any ranging from the average citizen is going to pay $350 a year to, I was told yesterday, it's going to be $1,000 a year per family. For the average family in the Central Valley is going to come out of your check to cover a paid family and medical leave. Those things don't work particularly well. The minimum wage, and no, there are not many of the folks working in our economy. Mr. Trump created a really strong economy. We survived the Biden era, and now we've come back. Wages are, employees are in high demand, so wages are strong. Okay, inflation's tough. But again, I go back to Mr. Biden's unrestrained spending set the stage for that. But so it's not an issue of folks. I kind of lost my train of thought there. Please edit that out. But so wages are strong, but there are folks that, whether it's a teenager learning how to work, should be at the minimum wage. And when you raise that number artificially, as it's going to $15 an hour, and you're trying to bring in a person that doesn't know how to work yet, is trying to learn at their first job, whether it's in a service industry or an agriculture industry or anything where they're learning the basics of how to be a good person to come to work, the employer can't afford to pay that. And so when they can't afford to pay that, they won't hire them. And they'll either invest in technology, they'll use AI, or they'll use robotics, or they'll use a more sophisticated machine, or they'll just choose not to do it. And so instead of you having high level of customer service at your favorite, let's say, store, then you might have to wait in line a little bit longer because they're not going to have that extra person there to be able to take care of you. And that's the frustrating part about this. There's been so much disconnect with how reality is. It hadn't been talked about a lot, but we increased the unemployment benefits. And when I asked the question, well, what's this going to cost? I got a blank stare from the bill's patron. And then I got an answer from staff. Well, it doesn't really matter because the employer will pay whatever it takes to keep the fund solvent. That's a really bad way to do things. So we've talked about the minimum wage increase. We've talked about family and paid medical leave. There were a number of bills that made it more difficult for employers to be able to employ people. It was whether it was added benefits or additional restrictions. There's a bill that talks about how long you can work outside in warmer temperatures. I grew up on a farm, and you did what you have to do. And, we're stewards of this world that God's given us. And so that means that we take care of our animals and we take care of our crops. And we do what we have to do to be able to be responsible. Yet the government's stepping in and saying, no, you can't do it that way anymore because of some specious reason in my mind.
And I mean, we've talked about a lot of different things with Spamberger, the General Assembly, employment, and the budget and everything. But what's one thing do you think Virginia is falling behind in that other states might be doing a lot better in? States like our surrounding states, like West Virginia, Maryland, North Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, whatever it may be. What are we doing that's starting to fall behind of those states?
Well, there's a number of things, and it's some labor market things. There's been this pro-unionism, expanding unionism, project labor agreements, and other things that makes it more difficult and more expensive to operate in the Commonwealth. I think the biggest difference right now is there's this philosophy that business is not an ally. The business is an enemy, and that we need to put more regulations and more controls around them in Virginia. Some people talk about equity and all like that. I'm not quite sure what they're meaning. But when you look at what West Virginia and Tennessee and Kentucky and North Carolina and even Maryland, surprisingly, they recognize that it's got to be a collaborative venture. To go to an agriculture analogy, you got to feed the cow to make sure she makes milk. And we're starving the cow in Virginia. And so those folks, I had an economic developer yesterday told me that there's a large industrial facility that is now going to locate in the panhandle of West Virginia because the developer said, I'm not willing to take the risk of being in an business environment in the Commonwealth. And this is $1 billion plus investment. It's a big deal, and it's going to go across the line. And West Virginia's welcoming them with open arms.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of these kind of problems. I mean, Youngkin did a fantastic job with business expansion, which someone may have tried to take credit of that, but Youngkin did a really good job with that, and I think that we definitely are falling behind in some of that stuff. Switching gears a little bit, people like to know what their delegates do. They like to know, like, is my delegate doing things? Is my delegate active? Like, are they just sitting around? Like, what are they doing? And I mean, I know you pretty well. I actually got to see you at session with an invite, so thank you so much for that.
Yes,
But what's a bill that you've introduced this year, or have you introduced any bills this year? And if you have, or whatever, what was it, and what things have you supported? What things have you had to deal with?
Yeah, at several, and it's interesting to note that the legislative function is just part of this job. A lot of what we do, and I'm really blessed to have Amy Hensley working with us because she does an excellent job with constituent services. We had a Zoom call with an agency in Richmond today relating to a disabled disabled veterans. He wants to be. We had a Zoom call today with a disabled veteran and one of the agencies down there relating how can we make the system in Virginia work better for him. And so he has this challenge that he's trying to do. So we act as both a intermediary and a facilitator, and really, it's getting the phone answered and getting the emails responded to, and that is DMV and Unemployment Commission and DEQ, and you can name all the agencies. Amy's got a list of it probably by now has thousands of interactions on it. So that's part of what we do. And then another part of what I do and we do as a team is I'm out and about. And I go places to be where people are, because I don't think you can be a good legislator if you don't understand what's going on in people's lives.
Absolutely.
And whether it's a Rotary Club or a school event or the cafe down the street to have breakfast or lunch or something, or those things, it's important to be out and about. Church, all those things that were out there. But from a legislative side, it was an okay year. Being in the minority, you go in, you don't expect to be able to put policy in that is going to fundamentally change the direction of the folks on the other side of the aisle. But what you do is focus on what are the things that I can do to improve the lives of the citizens in the 35th district, and then the Commonwealth overall. I had a number of bills that I worked on, and some of them I worked collaboratively with folks across the aisle, and I do appreciate that. There's a 60-70% of the bills that go through are just good policy and that we work collaboratively in. And then the cats and dogs issues we're going to fight about, because we should. I have my fundamental values, and I believe this is what our Constitution says, and this is what our community, our constituents want our Commonwealth to be. And I am rock solid on those. There is no compromise on your values. But the trick is to figure out where you can, without compromising your values, where you can figure out how to achieve something positive, and working with the other side on that. So there were several bills I carried. Most of what I focused on was either economic development or how do you remove the regulatory burden. And you mentioned Governor Youngkin a little bit ago. He did a great job. The last count I heard, it was like 38,000 regulations or repetitive legislation had been removed from the Code of Virginia. Under his team. And we need to keep doing that, because there is a lot of unnecessary legislation and that has gone through that may have been well-intentioned, but it does complicate our lives. So I focused on economic development and how to reduce that regulatory burden. And that was as simple as a tax credit I talked about earlier on the housing. There was some regulations that made lime and fertilizer distributors, made it more complicated for them than it needed to be. There was duplicative reports. Can you imagine? You had 3 or 4 different state agencies that basically were reporting all the same information on different time schedules and different criteria, but all trying to get to the same point. Why were we doing that? You just need to talk to each other. So that's what this bill did. It consolidated reports into a single report relating to some environmental quality issues. Dealt with some agriculture stuff relating to stormwater control, which is a big deal in our part of the world. Ag's the biggest industry, ag and forestry, the largest industry in the Commonwealth, and it is the big driver here. So you do those things. Now, I was disappointed. There were some bills that really were uh, run over by partisan politics. A couple of those were relating to how do we protect our youth from the AI expansion and chatbots. And I think you've got to have a good balance. That's a role of government, is the appropriate balance to create those guardrails. We don't want to squash the industry. We want the industries, all industries, to have a fair opportunity, but we also don't want to create something that's unsafe or unfettered, particularly when we're talking about this digital world, because you have it's influenced by the entire world. We've had the big TikTok question. Are we going to let the Chinese impact our children, and or not? And I appreciate Mr. Trump dealing with those type things. So those are some of the things that we accomplished, and we will continue to accomplish. The other thing that we do is we want to point out the hypocrisies or the differences. That there's stark differences in policy and philosophy between a conservative Republican like myself and folks on the other side of the aisle. I had this conversation yesterday at a Chamber of Commerce event. There was some gentleman there who suggested we need to raise taxes. And he said it was unfair and all like that. And I thought it was really interesting. It was never a conversation about how do we reduce spending and let people keep money in their pocket. It is how do we take more money out of someone else's pocket to give it to a different party. And he and I had a pretty heated conversation about that. And my statement is, if you want to see big government, if you want to see local government and state government and federal government continue to expand, continue to be in your life, and continue to impact what you do every day and every minute, then sure, vote that way. But if you don't, if you want to it's like my wife said. She said, I'm so tired of this, these people coming after me on this. I just want to be left alone to do my thing. And I think that is really the American dream. So let's provide the necessary services in an economic and efficient and efficient manner, and then get out of the way and let people achieve the things. It is amazing what people have done when they have a challenge in front of them. Just think of all the changes in humanity, in society, have been caused by someone's initiative to solve a problem, to achieve something that's positive.
And you've talked a lot about like some of the stuff that you've done and some of the bills and stuff, but what's like getting like on more of a relaxed kind of stance?
Mhm.
What's the most like rewarding thing about being a delegate, or what's like the most rewarding part of your job?
So one word really was rewarding thing was the Augusta County Market Animal Show. And there's this young lady that I actually bought her pig 3 years ago or so.
Oh, cool.
She came up to me and with a big smile on her face, and I think she's an 8th grader this year. I can't remember, but she is just doing exceptional. And her grandma was there with her, and she was so proud of her pig. And we got a picture with her, and it was really neat because she was trying to get the pig arranged so that we could get a good picture of him, and she needed help. And this girl that she didn't know but was showing pigs too came over and helped her. And that's what is very rewarding about how can we collaborate to make people's lives better. So seeing things like that, helping people like this veteran today, if we can continue to move forward and have success. Things as simple as back during COVID, people couldn't get the DMV to answer the phone, right? And so all these things were going wrong. We would help with that. And again, I got to give a lot of credit to Amy because she juggles a lot of balls and deals with a lot of issues, and they're very, very a multitude of different issues. So when you go home at the end of the day and you've made somebody's life better, help them make their life better is a better way of saying that. That's what's really rewarding about it.
And the one thing that's awesome, not only about you but your office in general, is Amy's very responsive with things, and you're very responsive with things. And if people have questions, they can actually reach out to you. You know, you're willing to talk with your constituents,
Right.
because there's some delegates out there that they won't even talk to you.
Right.
Like they'll just be
That's
like,
right.
"Who are you? Like, what do you want?"
Yeah.
You know, and that's something that's different about you and a couple other offices. And I really appreciate that.
Well,
You know,
thank
it's
you. I
something that
appreciate you
it's something
saying that.
that's not only just important, but it matters. You know, and it shows your values a little bit. And because you talked about values a little bit earlier, because once you lose your values, what do you really have?
Yeah.
Because what are you standing on? If nobody can trust you, if you won't talk to anybody, I mean, what do you really have? And I know that you're a man of faith. You're
Yes.
very open about that.
Mhm.
And how do you incorporate your faith and everything with the General Assembly?
Mhm.
And like, how do you incorporate that? Like,
Well, a couple of different ways. One, prayer. And my wife and I, when I'm in Richmond, I'm there during the week and I come home on the weekends, we do our devotions over the phone. And, you know, prayer is an important part of our lives. It's also, I think, an important part of our society's life. And I encourage folks to pray. I do believe that's the most impactful thing that a citizen can do. And then for me, you know, my faith drives my values. And I was fortunate to be raised in the church, and I've been a Christian all my life. And so I use those to drive where I think we should go. And then, you know, our Constitution is our basic document, and that was created by men of faith. And there's a really interesting movie that came out a couple of months ago, The Great Awakening. And it talks about a guy named George Whitefield, who was a contemporary of the Wesleys, which, you know, started that Methodism, you know, broke away from the Church of England. And it talked about the relationship Mr. Whitefield and Benjamin Franklin had. And the message that Whitefield offered ultimately was that our rights come from God. And that was a new concept, as I understand, what in that era. And that so it drove what the American Revolution became and what our Constitution or Declaration of Independence, and really the basis for this grand experiment that we have. You know, the rights that you and I have are assigned to us by our Creator, and not by some monarch, not by someone that acts as an intercessory. It is us with that direct relationship. And those rights can't be taken away. And if we can maintain that, if we understand that, then the system will work fine. When we start going away from that and say, no, it's expedient, you know, we're having a bad time right now. We don't like what somebody on the other side's doing. We're going to change the rules, or we're going to ignore the rules. That is not the recipe for success. I will say that that is the path to disaster.
and you kind of talked about the Great Awakening film.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, I have to see this
You
because
do.
I've had two people in the last 2 weeks
Right.
tell me, like, "Have you seen this?" And I'm like, "No, I've never even heard of it."
Yeah.
And now you're talking about it too. So
Right.
I guess this is something it went over my head, and I guess I just missed.
Mm-hmm.
But like, are there any other like major topics like with Spanberger or the General Assembly that you think we should touch on?
Well, we've talked a lot about it, and I think ultimately, let's look at this from a really comprehensive perspective. Politicians have the reputation we deserve, right?
Unfortunately.
When we ignore the process, when we don't tell the truth, when we say one thing to get elected and then do another, right? People have a reason to look at us askance.
Makes sense.
I would suggest what I always say is, man, please reach out to me. If I do something that you don't agree with, or you think I've done something that I said I would do differently, please reach out and talk. Let's talk about it. And you know, none of us are perfect and all, but you know, if you go in with the mindset that I am going to do the best that I can and operate within the confines, those guardrails that are created, because that's what's given us the 409 years of successful democracy in the Commonwealth and 250 years of success in the United States. It's not each of us individually. It is us collectively with operating within the system. And so I think that's what needs to be done. And one of my goals is when I go out and I talk, particularly young folks, I make that statement about politicians. And then I say, but it's your fault. It's your fault because if you don't choose to get engaged, if good people do not get engaged and operate within their values and live with what is important. Live how we agreed to live, or govern how we agree to govern. If we don't do those things, then if you don't step forward, then people less capable, or perhaps are having a perspective that's different than the majority of us, so different than what we've agreed to be, then those are the folks going to make the rules and decide the direction of the country. And I just think that's fundamentally wrong. So I encourage people to get involved. I encourage people to register to vote. I'm extremely disappointed with a number of people that have chosen not to vote in every election. Every election matters. It's not just the presidential election or the governor's race. It matters in your town council. It matters at your board of supervisors. It matters at your school board. It matters all the way through this process. So go register to vote, and then vote, and make sure your friends and neighbors vote.
And I think that one of the biggest things I hear as a podcaster, because I talk with the community every single day, 7 days a week, I'm out talking with people. And I think the biggest thing that I've heard is my vote doesn't count. It doesn't matter what I vote. And you'd be surprised how many people actually believe that.
Right.
And in certain elections, when enough people say that, it'll completely change the entire outcome of the election. And I know that there's some delegate seats in the last election. They're pretty close.
Right.
Absolutely. And there was even some Republican elections where it's like, or some elections with some Republicans. So it's like, oh, my district's Republican. I don't have to vote. I don't have to worry about it. He's going to win. Because there was a couple close ones.
There were.
And it's just, we can't have the mindset of, oh, someone else will take care of the problem, or, oh, I don't need to vote because my vote doesn't count, because it really does.
It does.
And you talked about young people, and you talked about registering to vote. You talked about getting engaged and doing your civic duty, something that is an absolute blessing to have in this country, because a lot of countries don't have that. You go to places like China, Pakistan, wherever, like, you don't have the right to do a lot of this stuff. And America is just a very unique country where the citizens truly have the power. And getting back to what I was saying, like, you talked about getting engaged. What are things that young adults, or just adults in general, what are things that we can do to get engaged? What are things that we can do to help try to shape our elections, especially for someone who's not very political? Like, what's something that they can do to be engaged other than just putting a name on a ballot and stick it in the machine?
Yeah, I think there's a number of things. Be informed and talk to people, that aren't just like you. Talk to your parents, talk to your grandparents, talk to the folks that you work with or go to school with, and get a well-rounded perspective of that, and then filter that through your value system. And as a good conservative Republican, I hear lots of different things from all different, like the gentleman I referred to yesterday. He's a good, well-meaning person, but he's misguided in that he thinks that the government's not big enough, right? And so I've ran that through my filter system. So you need to have those conversations, and then get engaged, be involved in your community, civic clubs, help. The 4-H, FFA are great training grounds for that. Rooting clubs in our community are tremendous. We have other lines and Rotary and all like that. You become engaged in your community, and then you see and you hear what's going on. And then you can start thinking about, well, how can we make a difference? And when it's your time, and it's our time to do something every time, and that may be just voting. That may be that is going to be what your role is, but make sure that you vote in an informed way and vote every time. Or it may be that you step up and volunteer to serve on a board or a commission, or you stand for election, or all those things, but be willing to step forward. And I'd encourage whatever age you wish to get started. I've seen some delightful folks that have gone from preteen up through in high school, and then in whether the workforce or into college, and become engaged, and they're impactful on their community. And that's what politics is supposed to be: impactful in a positive way on our community. And we've got to make sure enough people are engaged in that, so that it doesn't get hijacked by those folks that look at the world in a way that's askance to our values.
And I think that local community impact is actually a lot more important than people think, because people think like, oh, local laws, they don't really make any difference. Like local things don't affect that much, which really it does. I mean, you got personal property taxes. You have a bunch of stuff in your local community. You might have a food tax on food when you go out to eat at a restaurant. Like all that stuff is based off of your local government. And your local government also affects things like public libraries and stuff like that. So like local government does have a huge role, bigger than what you probably think it does. And even when it comes to like the education with the school board, so not only just just like the county itself, but like having like your public education for your children, like that matters too. And I don't think that people understand how much money that they can save if they actually get engaged, because some people just check a ballot on a box and then that person raises their taxes and then you just complain, oh, my taxes went up, and then you just blame whoever's in the state control because you're like, it has to be them, right? And like we can see that across different counties. And something like with personal property tax is Warren County just increased their property tax by 18%. And now they're getting a huge community backlash. So hopefully that'll change. I don't have any faith that it will. But it's like, that's what I mean. Like an 18% increase at one time on just personal property tax, like that's insane. But what do you have to say about any of that stuff?
Well, I think the engagement's the key. And I think as we all go through our lives, there's many different parts to our lives that God's blessed us to place us here and in this time, and He has asked us and gives us opportunities to do certain things at different times of our lives. And I've always appreciated the opportunity to be engaged in our community and have those conversations with people. And as you better understand what is going on, then you have better opportunity to impact that, to make that go in a good direction. And so those of us that step back and say, that's for somebody else to do, I don't want to do that, or then you really are, you need to look inside your heart and say, is that the right role for me? Is there not a better way for me to make a difference for my family, myself, and my community?
And then kind of winding down, because I know I have places to be and you have places to be as well because you're a busy guy. This a non-serious question before we get off of here. I got to ask, when you're in session, because I know that when you're sitting in committees, you can just be there like this and it's just boring, it's tiring, you just want to go to sleep. What fuels you through? Is it energy drinks, coffee? What gets you through the day? Like you got to have something.
Yeah, that's true. I do think probably more coffee than it's good for me. When I'm on the session, we have a little lunchroom, break room behind us, and I'll go back there, and they have the little Hershey's miniatures, and the Mr. Good Bar is my favorite little miniature. So,
Good bars are good.
Yeah, I'll stock up on some chocolate, and you'll see me sitting at my desk and eating there. But overall, what you're really trying to do is make sure you take care of your body, make sure you eat right, and you sleep, get enough sleep, because it's tough. It is fast paced. And when I go to Richmond, I go on Sunday afternoon and stay till Friday afternoon. Then I come home and spend time with my wife and the family. But during the week, at my desk by 6 o'clock in the morning, and sometimes it's 9 o'clock at night till you get home. Most of the time, it's somewhere between 6 and 9 that you're back to the apartment and able to decompress, and get ready for the next day. But it's a privilege. It's a tremendous privilege, but it's also a great obligation. And I'm proud to be able to do it. I always look forward to doing it collaboratively with our community, with our constituents. Josh, you came down, and I really appreciated that, because as people better understand the system, then we can get more people engaged to make it more effective in a positive way. And if it's viewed as something that, oh no, I can't make a difference, please don't think that, because every person can make a difference.
Yeah, and coming down and visiting you and a couple of the delegates in Richmond, great opportunity, and I greatly appreciate it. I think it's something that everybody should strive to do at least once in their life, is just go to the General Assembly, But I thank you so much for sitting down and having this interview, and I'm sure we'll be out in touch soon. I'll text you with some other things. We'll have to do this again. But thank you so much.
Thank you. And folks, reach out to our office. Amy and I are always happy to help, and we're happy to have you come to Richmond when we're in session and enjoy the tour. Josh could be a tour guide for us.
Hey, I've walked the halls enough.
Yes, you have.
But thank you, everybody who watched through this. Please go down, hit the follow button, hit the subscribe button, as every little bit helps, because I don't get paid for any of these videos as of now. Hopefully I will in the future. So just getting a share or a follow down below or liking this video will help me out immensely. So thank you. God bless you, and God bless America.
Absolutely. Thank you.